Our thesis is, how is the society of England structured with focus on the working class and the upper class culture?
When you think of England, there are often some stereotypes that come to mind. One of them is that they drink a lot of tea. Different countries have different perceptions of the English people. You will often characterize England with a wealthy class that contains rich Englishmen who go to Cambridge and Oxford, or a lower class that live in the working class districts outside of Manchester and Stratford, as portrayed in movies like East is East and Billy Elliot. Many of England's famous hooligans come from the working class.
A new English study divides the English people into 7 classes. The first class is the elite. It's the richest, most privileged class in England. They have often went to private schools and elite universities. People in this class go to museums and listen to classic music. Then there's the established middle class. It's the second most rich people in England. They socialize a lot and take part in many cultural events. The technical middle class is a small newer class in the English society. They mostly interact among others from the same class and are frequent users of the social media. Then there's the new affluent workers. They are the economically secure ones that aren't wealthy. The class is very social and cultural. The traditional working class consists mostly of elderly people that have their own house but no cultural interests. There's also the emergent service workers, the young people with cultural interests that are social but not economically secure. The last class is the precariat, the most poor class in England. The people mostly mix with others from the same class, and 80% of them do not own a house. These 7 classes have emerged because of several historical factors. Under the medieval times, England was structured after the feudal system as many other European countries. There was a big difference between the rich and the poor, and you could clearly see a hierarchy. In the 1400s, the capitalistic ideas broke through in England, which ended the feudal system. This was caused by the expanding trade and other factors. Other changes in England was the Industrial Revolution.
The Industrial Revolution contributed to the making of the big working class in England, given that there were created many big factories. It led to the urbanization, where many moved to the city to work in the factories rather than being farmers. Contrary to countries as France, none of the nobility had to resignate their titles or give up any of their money. The noble families kept going and are still here today. However, they have lost most of their previous privileges. England's nobility is still a big part of the present society in England. The proof of this is a widespread study from 2010 that shows that a small group of aristocrats in England own a third of the country. The vast majority of these are having noble titles. This and the fact that the Conservative Party has been the biggest in England for many years has contributed to the big inequality.
Today, the conditions are different from those under the feudal system. But the UK still suffers from social inequality that also enhances the foreign stereotypes about upper and lower social classes in the UK. The United Kingdom has a Gini index on 35.1%. The Gini index describes the relation between the highest and the lowest income in a country. To understand the British Gini index, we compared it to the whole Gini index for all the OECD countries, which is on 31.5%. In 2015, Denmark had the lowest Gini index overall, on a smashing 24.9%. That's more than 10% lower than the British. A huge part of this inequality can be ascribed to the conservative mind that has marked the British government. Margaret Thatcher has had a big influence on this, as the inequality has been rising since 1979, when she became the Prime Minister in the United Kingdom.
The inequality is also seen in the decreasing social mobility which has suffered since the 1970s. A report made by the British Parliament shows that the generation of youngsters born in the 1980s is the first generation after World War II that has entered the labor market with a lower income than their parents. This is definitely not a good sign to the rising inequality in England.
To underline the inequality, we will point out that the richest 6% of the English population earns what equals 763,000 Danish krones a year, compared to the poorest 15% who earns about 68,000 Danish krones a year. This is a huge difference between incomes. In comparison, in Denmark, social security recipients with children gets about 148,000 Danish krones a year, which is almost double of what the poorest in the UK gets, although we have to take into consideration that it's cheaper to live in the UK.